Super happy to have Gabriel here from the Avalanche team. Hey, Gabriel. Super excited to have you on. So why don't we just get started? Like, tell us about your background, your role at Avalanche. What do you do on a day-to-day basis, and what gets you excited?
Sure. So thank you for the opportunity. It's an honor. I love what you guys are doing at Covalent, genuinely adding a ton of value to the Avalanche ecosystem. So I know everybody on the team is very grateful. So I just want to take a moment to express our gratitude to you and your team. Really, you guys are doing amazing work. So thank you. So my name is Gabriel Cardona. I am developer evangelist at Ava Labs, and my focus is onboarding developers into the Avalanche ecosystem. And I have been into the blockchain now. I got my very first Bitcoin, BTC, from Gavin Andreessen's original faucet. So everybody knows about crypto faucets. You go and you put in an address and you get a little drip of a crypto. They all started with this one original faucet. Gavin Andreessen is the gentleman who took over when Satoshi checked out. So, Satoshi left the scene and he handed over the keys of the kingdom to an engineer named Gavin. And Gavin put up a faucet where I've always heard he gave away 50,000 BTC, which is $2.85 billion in today's prices. So we owe him a debt of gratitude. But he gave out 5 Bitcoin at a time. This was in around 2011 or so. I found out about it from Hacker News. So I got my first Bitcoin in 2011. I was there for the Ethereum launch. So I saw, transitioning from Bitcoin into Ethereum. I was there for the Bitcoin scaling debate and for Bitcoin Cash. So at the time, I had a startup. This is in around 2017. I had a startup doing 3D printer, and I had a 3D printer connected to the Internet of Things. And I was working on the ultimate vision was I was going to have an Ethereum smart contract that you could fire off a transaction and it would hit my 3D printer over the Internet of Things and build a print. And so I was prototyping that, and I was learning about smart contracts using Truffle through Udemy. And I'm a software engineer, of course, and so there's been multiple times in my career where the UT of a tool set has really just shocked me and shown me how if you have the right set of tools, you can 10x or 100x your productivity. And so when I saw Truffle, I was just frankly shocked at the quality of it. And like, oh, okay, finally somebody with a really great framework for blockchain development. And so I actually put my startup to bed and decided to pivot into creating developer tooling for Bitcoin Cash, because I was super into Bitcoin Cash right after the fork. Strictly from an engineering perspective, it seemed like, okay, this has a great potential to use Bitcoin in a cash-like setting again. So I created a startup called Bitbox, and Bitbox was developer tooling for the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem, a JavaScript SDK, cloud services, a wallet. And ultimately, that was acquired by Bitcoin.com. So in 2017, right during the peak of the whole previous big crypto boom, I joined Bitcoin.com, and I built out the developer services team there to around 10 people, I believe, maybe right below 10 people. And then along the way, I found Avalanche. And so, I'm a developer evangelist. So similar to today, I travel all around the world. Prior to COVID, travel around the world and meet up with different engineers. And frankly, Avalanche really shocked me. It's an amazing technology stack. The team behind it is, computer science PhDs from Cornell, and the level of engineering is huge. And so I joined Ava Labs around a year ago, I think 11 months ago. And so I've been working on the developer services stuff there as well. So now, like I said, my primary focus is just on-ramping developers in our ecosystem. And I believe that the blockchain has the potential to be as meaningful as the web. And so I view the work that we're doing today to be as impactful as the early internet pioneers. And so do you want to jump in, or shall I keep going?
No, please go on. This is so interesting.
Yeah, awesome. So I would say sort of pivoting from that, the things that really excite me right now, I think there's 2 sort of things that are pretty big that are on my radar. The first is the censorship resist web, which I'll dig into a little bit. And then the other is this idea of sovereign money. So I think those are both really, really big, and they're going to have a big impact on the human condition. And so, I view it's hard for me to say, what is the best, what is the second best, because it depends, which angle you're perceiving the problem. But to me, the web is kind of like the pinnacle of human creation. And, to me, it represents the pinnacle of software and hardware and networking, and all of these different skills come together. And then we have the web, which kind of represents hyperspace. It almost represents a new dimension or something. It represents this abstraction that we can all share our thoughts into. And then with the advent of, everybody carrying a supercomputer in their pocket and everybody having access to social media, all of a sudden everybody has a voice. So it's this great equalizer. And Clay Shirky, who's an author, wrote this book called Here Comes Everybody. And he points out that for the first time in history, the ability to organize at scale and the ability to take an idea and spread is no longer in the hands of a few people. Now it's in the hands of everybody. So everybody in the world has a voice, and everybody in the world is going to be able to tell their story. And so, that's the web. And then we have hypertext, and we're able to take all of our ideas and put them in this digital space. And now the digital and the physical are converging. And this digital space, it rewards and encourages open source. So, because information it wants to be free, and prior to, crypto and NFTs, it was really hard to have digital scarcity. The business model on the web is to do everything open source. And so after, Netscape became Firefox, it kind of became impossible to charge for a browser at that point, because, they're giving away what we perceived as the best, the highest quality software in the world. How could Internet Explorer charge? Even eventually Internet Explorer became Edge and went open source. Even Microsoft is now open sourcing parts of their Windows stack. And so you have this environment where open source is rewarded. And so the value is in the network and not the intellectual property. And there's this play for network effects. So the web is incredibly powerful. It's a great equalizer. It gives everybody in the world a voice. But now we're seeing deforming or censorship. And so we found ourselves in this position where we're all routing our communications now through private companies. And so even though there are public protocols where we could be routing our APIs through public, that we own our own data kind of set up, it's not that way yet. And we're doing Facebook and Twitter. And so over the past couple of years, we've been seeing people get deplatformed. And independent of how you feel about, the person who may or may not have been removed from Facebook, it's a troubling trend. And so really excited about is this censorship-resistant web, this new web which is emerging, built with the Interplanetary File System, IPFS, and Filecoin and libp2p. The people at Protocol Labs are absolutely amazing. Ton of respect for those guys and gals. And so, Avalanche has partnered up with Aleph.im, and then there's a couple other partners, which I don't believe are publicly announced yet, but ultimately building out APIs which feel very much like like Amazon Web Services. So, developers are used to having this API. Instead of pushing all of our content to the traditional web, why don't we push it to the decentralized web? And then similar to all these other decentralized networks, there's no one single point of failure that whoever wants to censor can go and shut it down. So that's one thing I find very exciting. And then the other is just sovereign money, truly sovereign money. So, pardon me. I believe that wealth is critical to the human condition. And I don't want to sound shallow there. What I really mean is that the idea of being able to take your work or your creativity or your inheritance or whatever and be able to transmute this into a store of value, some abstraction that we all agree, like, hey, I'm able to take this value and put it in this thing and store it there. And then over time, I'm able to use it as a medium of exchange so I can buy stuff. And then once we all become very familiar and have a muscle memory with that abstraction, then we can even use it as a unit of account. So I can say this car costs $10,000. And we all understand intuitively what that means. What is $1? Well, we have a sense of what that is, so we know what $10,000 is. So as long as there are like hardworking and creative sentient creatures, I presume that there's going to be some notion of wealth, some notion of this person was creative and they worked their butt off. They deserve to be rewarded in some way. They pushed our entire species forward. So now they have this thing of wealth, whatever that is, and they need to store it and they need to be able to use it. So, money, wealth, to me, it feels very critical to, the human condition. And it's always been the case that wealth is able to be gamed by people who have more wealth. And the very worst example of that is, the Fed with the United States. When we removed the gold standard in 71 or 2, whatever it was, they turned on the engines and they started printing out this paper. And really, it's just debt. Basically, we all are in crazy debt now because of this financial system. But then now we have this cryptocurrency. It's, wealth or money, which is backed by computer science and mathematics and not the power of state. And with things like mnemonics, so, a 256-bit human readable string, which can be in your native tongue, and from which you can derive an astronomical number of seeds and keys. You can imagine today, if you have $1 million in cash, what do you do with it? Well, you can put it under your bed. That doesn't seem very reasonable. You can put it in the bank, but that comes with its own problems. Or you can just put it on the blockchain and have a mnemonic somewhere, and it's totally self-sovereign. You own it. And there's even, you can do, I'm forgetting what the exact term is, but you can basically do wallets where there's a $5 wrench attack, which famously, computer scientists are willing to spend $100 million in some big computer system, but then a guy shows up with a wrench and says, I'm going to beat your kid's head in, give me keys, and you give him the keys. Well, there are certain ways you can set up wallets where you literally cannot give the person the private key. You don't know what it is. I'm forgetting what the word is right now, but I think you know what I mean. So anyway, so there's this idea of totally self-sovereign money. For the first time in history, we have complete control over our money, and it's backed by computer science and mathematics. So to me, those are two things that I'm very, very excited about. The censorship-resistant web, and similar to the early internet pioneers of the late 60s and early 70s, whose work is now 50 years later having such a radical impact. I believe that our work will have impact like that. And then also self-sovereign money. I just think it's the first time in all of human history that people are able to truly be in control of their money. It's a new type of money, an open source money, a money where innovation is a feature and not a bug. So those two things excite me.
Very cool. Very, very exciting. I love your passion. It's so let's, I just have a totally unrelated topic.
Sure.
What's going on at Ava Labs? Like everyone from your marketing team to your engineering team to Farid, like these are A++ talent. Sure. What is the secret sauce here? How has the team been able to attract such a caliber of talent? Would love to hear your thoughts there, because we need to rep that at Covalent as well. Not saying that our team is great, but we need more and more great people.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate then all the way to the top of our food chain, starting with Goon, our CEO, and Kevin, our COO, and Ted, our Chief Protocol Officer, our three co-founders. They're all exceptional computer scientists. I believe they're all PhDs from Cornell. Although for what it's worth, certificates don't matter so much. It's more that college shows that people can work and they can get through the grind and they can deliver. And so I never want to play down academia, but at the same time, I want to say academia isn't a strict requirement. Really what matters is continuous learning and passion and being able to be creative and easy to get along with and those kind of things. But with regards to your question, I think Kevin and Goon and Ted have they've accomplished the dream of a startup founder. So they've been able to marry a inspiring vision. So the Internet of Finance, it's a very big vision. They've married that with a genuine technical innovation. So Avalanche Consensus genuinely is a big step forward. In the same way when Nakamoto Consensus was released by Satoshi, it was a computer science innovation from classical consensus to Nakamoto Consensus. And that's why, all of the engineers got so turned on. There was no hype here. This was in fact a big deal. Satoshi genuinely solved something which had been unsolved for decades. And so Avalanche Consensus represents that big of a leap forward. So first off, at a fundamental level, the people who know what's up, academics, computer scientists, entrepreneurs, they all appreciate that. No, Avalanche Consensus is in fact the real deal. And on top of that, we've been able to incentivize everybody in the appropriate way. So I live in San Francisco. I live and work in Silicon Valley. I've been here most of my career. I've been here over 10 years. And, one of the secret sauces is to focus on computer science over hype. You do want buzz and brand, but computer science, there's got to be a strong foundation of genuine computer science and engineering, and then incentivizing your team in the proper way. And that's what startups do so well. You get a taste, you get a piece of the pie or whatever. There's a reason for you to work so hard, because ultimately if you're successful, it's going to pay off well for you. And so I think Kevin and Goon and Ted have done a great job with having a great vision, marrying it with computer science, and then incentivizing everybody in the proper way. And I just think Goon created the first proof of work system, I believe, or one of the very first ones, called Karma. I just posted the white paper on my Twitter account earlier this week in 2003. So, this was a problem that they were working 6 years or so before Satoshi released his white paper. So I think there's just a lot of street cred there with Goon and Kevin. And then, as I mentioned, a genuine vision and marrying that with a genuine tech innovation and then properly incentivizing people.
I'm definitely a Goon fanboy here. Sign me up. So I've been following his work for a very long time, even before Ava Labs, before Avalanche. for those of you who, completely unrelated, but he did a bank core takedown many years ago, I think 2017. And that's when I was like, okay, something is up here. And so I've been following, his work ever since.
He started Dow hack too, famously. He was aware of the Dow hack prior to it happening.
Yeah. He's also a Turkish sensation. I'm trying to figure out what that is. But every time we do something with Ava Labs or Avalanche, we get a lot of excitement in the Turkish community, which is very cool to see. Okay, cool. So in your day-to-day, what does your average day look like? You obviously have a KPI for the quarter or some kind of like higher mission that you're driving towards, which is developer adoption. But tactically, how does that parlay into your day? What does an average day look like for you?
Yeah, so I do. I really have two buckets of work that I focus on. One is just developer services, and then the other I actually maintain Avalanche JS. So those two complement each other because I'm maintaining the type/JavaScript library. I have a lot of hands-on, genuine engineering work that I do every day, and that buys me a little bit of street cred with actual developers, because not only am I just trying to be an evangelist, I actually do work on a code project. So I'm not just talking it, I'm actually working it. Right now, our developer services team is over 10 people. I think we have maybe around 4 or 5 engineers, and the rest of them are business development and marketing. And really, my job primarily is, first, I interface a lot over social media. So, I spend a lot of time on Telegram or Discord or Twitter. And so there's always somebody reaching out who needs help. So, for example, today at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are doing our office hours. Every Wednesday now from 2 to 5 Eastern Time, we're going to be doing office hours in Discord. And that's simply because our ecosystem is just absolutely exploding. And so there's just a ton of people who need some type of hand-holding, some guidance. So a big part of my job is interfacing in Telegram or Discord or Slack with third parties. So similar to what we're doing in our Slack channel. And then the other part of it is, of course, going to conferences and to hackathons and to meetups. So prior to COVID, like especially when I was at Bitcoin.com, I traveled all over the world. I went to Tokyo 6 times, Hong Kong 6 times. I was in Jeju Island in South Korea, Milan, Amsterdam, all over the United States. And so, the blockchain is worldwide, and it's always kind of refreshing and eye-opening as I go into all of these different markets around the world, and I just get a sense of the scope of the opportunity. In traditional finance is thousands of trillions of dollars, and we're in the internet of finance. So you got to presume it's going to be that and so much greater, because all of the traditional finance use cases still apply. But now you've got tokens and smart contracts and non-fungible tokens and DeFi and this whole other ecosystem. And we're really just now in the first working generation of this technology. Extrapolate 5 or 10 years and it's going to be absolutely crazy. So I would say the big part of my job is social media, and then going and actually interfacing with people. Right now we're doing it digital, but also in the real world, and just trying to inspire people. I genuinely believe that the greatest resource in the world is a competent engineer. And the reason is because we've had so many innovations in computer science in the last 100 years or so, going back to Babbage and his engine with Ada Lovelace, and all the way now. There's been so many changes that as a species, we haven't even had time to wrap our minds around them. And for the first time in all of human history, we have a whole new suite of tools which could really change the human condition. We really could change things radically in our lifetime. Already things have changed pretty radically. I always say one of my cliche lines is that technology is the story of the human experience. And what I mean by that is, the human condition has really not changed much in the last 100,000 generations or so. Sapiens have been about the same biology for about 100,000 generations or so. So what's the difference between me and my great-great-great-grandpa? Well, the difference is the technology which is around during our life, which allows me to have an impact and shape the world around me. And so it could be that everybody was as smart as Einstein 20,000 years ago, but they weren't able to have an impact because the tools did not exist, right? So it's totally about technology is the story of the human experience. and the technology which is around during your lifetime enables you to have an impact on the world. And so if you just saw the world right now, you would say, wow, the human species is facing a lot of big problems. It seems like things may not turn out so great for them. But then you stop and say, but think about all the new tools they have to solve these problems. They have the World Wide Web. For the time in all of human history, every single person has access to all of the human knowledge that ever existed. They all have a supercomputer in their pocket. Like if you would have went back 50 years ago and told the early internet pioneers perfect example is the IPv4 bug. So when they were developing when they were developing the IP stack in the early 70s, they were like, 4 billion addresses. Surely there will never be 4 billion computers in the world. Like, think about that, 4 billion computers. Well, they were wrong, of course, and they ran out of addresses in the 80s, and that's why we're transitioning to IPv6. So I believe that the best resource in the world is a great engineer, because we have all of these crazy new tools, and it's only going to think about Satoshi. It took one person to radically change finance in a way. The genie is out of the bottle. It's a one-way door. And so it doesn't take much. It only takes one or two really, really good people to change the world. And we have all of these tools. And so a big part of my job is simply trying to inspire people, trying to go out and say, the whole world you see around you, everything from the phone to your car to your food, was all the world we have today is by people who worked hard, who came before us. And you yourself can literally change the world. You can make it and shape it in the way you want. And we have tools which are unlike all of human history. So I think this part of my job is simply trying to inspire people to build amazing things.
You know, I got to be honest here. You've definitely inspired me. I'm pretty jazzed up, and I'm just gonna go hard this week. I think there's a lot that needs to be done, and then thanks for that pep talk. Appreciate it. Okay, so now you've talked about the comms work that you do with the interfacing, either in the digital realm with Slack and Telegram and Discord and the office hours, also in Meets if the things open up. It's been crazy. It's been a year since I've set foot on a flight, but hopefully we have light at the end of the tunnel. And can you talk a little bit about the Avalanche, the JS library? What kind of tooling you do there? It's a TypeScript library, but what does it accomplish? What is the motivation behind that? And what's your personal interest in maintaining that library?
Yeah. So I'm in Avalanche JS, and as you mentioned, it is a TypeScript code base. It was created by Colin Couchet, one of our previous engineers, an absolute wizard. If you see that, Colin, tons of love and respect for him. He was maintaining it when I came on board. It's TypeScript, so it's very modern and idiomatic. He did a really good job of just creating a very tight and clean and modern code base. We have extensive test code coverage, and we've done manual QA like crazy. And so it's a really, really good code base. And so, kind of to unwind it a bit, web developer, my path to being an engineer is kind of different than other people's path. I actually studied music in college. I didn't study computer science. And so I spent most of my 20s being a musician and not really kind of creating websites on the side. And it was when I found out I was going to be a father in my mid-20s that I really focused on doing software and pivoted. And within a year, things just took off like crazy. And so I am a web developer, and I don't have sort of the traditional college path where you learn something like Java or C+ or something, and then you learn a web stack. So you go from super low level to high level. I came from the opposite direction. I learned very, very high level stuff first. So I learned HTML and CSS with jQuery and a little bit of PHP and MySQL sprinkled in. And then I learned Java so I could Android. And then I learned Ruby so I could do Ruby on Rails and Node.js. And so I've come from the very high level down to the very low level. And so I identify as a web developer. I absolutely love the web. It's had a hugely transformative impact on my life. When I was in college, Google paid for me to be a member of the W3C's HTML working group. And so I'm an acknowledged contributor to the HTML specification. And so just that has basically opened the door for so many conversations. Saying my name is in the HTML spec will pretty much get you a 10-minute conversation with anybody. You know what I mean? And so to me, I'm just incredibly passionate about the web. I happen to like JavaScript. I know it's a language with a lot of warts, and there are plenty of JavaScript WTF me online, but JavaScript did something right. So for all the things it did wrong, it clearly did something right, because it's the largest runtime in all of history, and it bundles with everything. You know, the web is everywhere. It's truly ubiquitous. And so by targeting the web, you get this breadth. And now with tools like TypeScript, you can actually get depth as well, because the JavaScript workflow and language has improved so much in the past 5 years that if you haven't checked it out in a handful of years, I suggest checking it out, because JavaScript has matured in a way which pretty much shocks everybody who was laughing at it 5 years ago. And so, you know, now JavaScript is just incredibly powerful. It's very dynamic. I'm a huge fan of TypeScript. So, you know, again, coming from high level to low level, I spent most of my career not using types because I was using JavaScript. Well, anybody who's ever done any massive programming in the large knows that things like typing make your IDE come alive with auto-suggestion and finding errors in other files and telling you if the type is incorrect, and then build tools better. It gives you compile time errors instead of runtime errors, so you don't have to catch the bug with an actual user, etc. So yeah, JavaScript with TypeScript, I have this idea that you know, the pace of change is accelerating. There's continuously more and more complexity. And so one of the challenges that we face is to always be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the next big boom in complexity. And so you've always got to have the right tools in place that allow you to handle the next big boom. And if you don't, your code will buckle under its own abstractions. And so as humans, we're tool builders. It's one of the great things we do. And so it's one of the reasons I love being in the development services world, because we're always seeing such rapid innovation. And so to me, if you look at computer science, there is 2 trends that always remain true, from programming in the low to programming in the high, and from programming in the small to programming in the large. And so today, whatever we consider to be high level and super large will be low level and small to the 2 or 3 iterations down the line. And so there's always some new level abstraction, and I'm on the eternal quest for the higher level abstraction. And so TypeScript is just the right tool. So if you're a web developer and you're creating code in the large, you want to use TypeScript, and I'm a huge advocate of it. Of course, it transpiles into JavaScript, and any JavaScript, it's a strict superset of JavaScript. So any JavaScript is valid TypeScript. But regarding the actual library, Avalanche JS, so we have Avalanche is a network of networks. It's not just one blockchain. So we introduced several new paradigms, and one of them is that we are a heterogeneous network of many different blockchains and many different validator sets. We call them subnets. And so in our world, in Ethereum's world, you launch your dApp as a smart contract. In our world, you launch your dApp as what's called a virtual machine. And basically, a virtual machine is the application level logic of your blockchain. Technically, it's a state machine. So you have the state of your blockchain, and you have a state transition function, and then you have an API that you can interact with your blockchain through. And so we say that in the same way in object-oriented programming, you have a class, and then you have an instance of a class. In our world, you have a virtual machine, and then you have an instance of a virtual machine, which is a blueprint, or which is a blockchain, I should say. And for example, we have the Avalanche virtual machine, the AVM, and we have instantiated it into the X chain on our default subnet, but you can launch your own subnet today and launch your own version of the AVM on a subnet. And one subnet can have multiple instances of the same VM, or a VM live across different subnets, some of them public and some of them private. It's very heterogeneous. But this idea of virtual machines, they're basically like transaction serializations. So we have different transaction types: input transaction, or import transaction, X transaction, create asset transaction, send, all these things. And in order to do these actions, you basically need to create these serializations with just a bunch of bytes, and you need to post them to our full node. So our Avalanche JS library does a couple of different things. It has the full JSON RPC. So, we have, you can check balances, and you can get blocks by height, the kind of traditional stuff you can do over a JSON RPC. Of course, we support all of that, but even more powerfully, we support transaction serialization for the P chain, the C chain, and the X chain. We have three blockchains on our default subnet. And so you can create assets, you can import, you can do cross-chain swaps. So, and then the final thing it does is you can you can handle keys locally. So, we consider an anti-pattern for people to be storing their keys on a full node. Instead, you should do everything locally in your app. You should sign, you should create key pairs, etc. So Avalanche JS does all of that. It creates transactions and signs them locally. It handles key pairs, and it does all of the JSON RPC stuff. And then it works in concert with libraries like Web3 for doing C-chain stuff, and then you can also use it in concert with things like Truffle or Hard Hat. So our C-chain has 100% backwards compatibility with existing Ethereum development tooling, which is one of the reasons it's exploded so quickly, because taking a dApp from Ethereum and launching on our C-chain is relatively straightforward. So to kind of sum it up, Avalanche JS does all of the JSON RPC stuff. It creates all of the different transaction serialization types, and it does all of the different signing and key parent stuff locally. And my motivation for doing it is that I'm a web developer and I love JavaScript and TypeScript. I believe that the ubiquity of the web is just a huge opportunity. You can write one app and it can run on a watch, to a TV, to a computer, to a tablet, to a whatever. And so I'm just a big advocate of the web. And so it makes sense that I would maintain the web library.
Okay, awesome. Makes a lot of sense. So it's like a Web3 JS, but specifically to interact with the 3 blockchains and work around some of the nuances of the Avalanche ecosystem.
Yep.
Awesome. Also, because you have TypeScript now, you can access TypeScript rather than relying on pure script from like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It has the very best, it's genuinely a very idiomatic TypeScript code base. So, we follow all of the different, we have a style guide, right? So we try and have it be idiomatic with JavaScript and TypeScript. So if you're a web developer, it should feel right at home to you.
Awesome. Okay, so from your perspective, what's new and exciting that's coming up on Avalanche?
Sure, so much, my goodness. So one thing I've noticed, that, and this isn't just Avalanche, this is across the whole ecosystem, but it's something I'm witnessing, so I'm trying to put a term on it. I'm calling it the bridging, which is a horrible name, but it's just my placeholder name. And basically what I'm seeing is now the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, for better or worse, has really won the battle for being the engine of DeFi right now. Now, that doesn't mean it'll always be the winner. It doesn't mean it's not going to be, surpassed by something else. And I suspect it will, because that's the nature of technological. But at this exact moment in time, the Ethereum virtual machine is it's the winner. And if you do not have compatibility with the EVM, I don't see how you can be a real competition in DeFi. And the reason I say that is this. So, our mainnet has been live just a little bit over 6 months. And our, really, it's been over the last 8 weeks that we've had just tons of transaction on our C chain. But we threw up an instance of the EVM, and it's like a Petri dish. It just caught life instantly. And, we threw up Pangolin. We helped dedicate resources to create Pangolin, which is a Uniswap clone. And we have a bridge for moving assets, ERC20 and ERC721, between Ethereum and Avalanche. And right as soon as we threw it up, $100 million worth of assets, came from Ethereum to the Avalanche ecosystem. And then seemingly overnight, Pangolin had 225 million or something staked up. And, just the amount of projects and DeFi projects which have just taken off on Avalanche and have been seeing just big numbers, millions and millions of dollars of wealth staked or moved around in some way. It's seemingly happening overnight. And so me witnessing that from a firsthand really gave me a perspective and an appreciation for the EVM and how powerful it is, and how much, even though the developer ecosystem is very small, overall, the entire blockchain, all of them, if we even call the blockchain engineers, it's still very small compared to, traditional enterprise type stuff. But even with that little small developer ecosystem we have overall, the built-in knowledge of people who've already been launching DEXs on Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, and Tron, and all these other things, being able to transition their skills into Avalanche has just been awe-inspiring and humbling. It's just been really, really cool to watch. So what I'm seeing now is the bridging in all of these projects. So for example, we have the Avalanche Ethereum bridge. And right now there's a bridge being worked on so recently Bitcoin Cash got an instance of the EVM. It's a side chain, and there's a bridge being created between Bitcoin Cash and Avalanche right now. what I see just this, anywhere where there is an EVM compatible chain, there will be some type of bridge to move these assets in and out of these layer one solutions. So that's one thing I see, which is just interesting and noteworthy and exciting. The EVM, in my opinion, has won the of DeFi competition. Again, I suspect that there will be competition eventually, but at the moment there doesn't appear to be any.
If I may, so that is exactly what we're seeing. In fact, the reason we called our project Covalent, because covalent is a type of chemical and covalent bond. So we're binding these different, blockchains and one unified API. So that's like the genesis story. Of course, we didn't think it would be so hot so fast. We've been around for 3.5 years. But so that's why our project is called Covalent. And going on to that chemistry physics reference, because I'm a physicist by training, the way to think about what is happening here is that potential energy is getting converted into kinetic energy. So there's this potential for liquidity, for assets, for developers. And by providing the right set of tooling, suddenly all this kinetic energy, all the motion starts happening, right? So that's what's happened. So by introducing the bridge, the potential has always been there. It's just been unlocked now. And now you see the fluid motion of assets and talent across these chains. So I think I'm going to stop with my physics and chemistry reference yesterday, but it gives you that analogy of what is happening here.
Sure, and that's interesting to me. I think that underscores what I've been seeing, and that is that the very best minds across all these different industries are being pulled into blockchain and DeFi, like a network effect and like gravity. So yourself, you were trained as a physicist and you ended up in the blockchain. I myself was trained in classical music and I ended up in the blockchain. And it's because the blockchain has just an intense network effect and a gravity where it's pulling in the best and the brightest from all these different ecosystems because they see the scope of the opportunity, their entrepreneurial nature, they see all of this wealth and all of this innovation being created. So that's pretty cool to know that you were a physicist by training and transitioned over. That's good to know. To wrap that up, I see the bridging as something with regards to Avalanche. We are about to have, we've already started the first phase of a network upgrade called Apricot. We're going to be calling our network upgrades by fruits alphabetically. So our first one is apricot. We have blueberry, which is going to be coming after apricot. But we have epochs, which are being introduced. So our X chain is a DAG. It's a directed acyclic graph. And so it doesn't have total ordering. It only has partial ordering. And so this notion of epochs gives a notion of absolute time. So we're able to do a bunch of exciting stuff like state pruning. So right now, to spin up the blockchain, you've got to sync everything from the very beginning. Instead, you'll be able to sync from different epochs because we'll be able to do state summaries for different epochs. That's going to radically reduce the amount of time it takes to spin up a node from whatever it takes now, which is hours, maybe even days, to very, very short amount of time because you'll basically only have to sort from the very last epoch. It also enables governance. So governance is huge, and it's DAOs, a distributed autonomous organization, is one of the things I see that's very exciting to me. And it's this idea of governance, the idea of based on your proof of stake. So how much equity you have in the ecosystem, ultimately giving you a voice in the future of the ecosystem is very exciting. Governance is something that's getting ready to be turned on. We're also doing variable fees. So we're doing EIP 1559 style variable fees, which are what's being introduced in Ethereum at the moment. Right now, our gas was 470 GUI. That was when Avalanche was on $3 a token. It spiked up to 50. I think now it's at 30. So we reduced it to 225 GUI. But we're ultimately, it's going to be dynamic. Every single day, somebody tweets at me and it's like, your fees are too much. It's a placeholder thing. Things are moving a lot quicker than even we thought they might. We were pretty ambitious, but things are just going crazy. We did not expect we would be at $30 a token at this particular point. So things are sort of ahead of where we expected them to be. But ultimately, we're going to have EIP 1559 style fees, dynamic fees. Another thing is that's coming in this Apricot hard fork is what's called ARC20. And so, of course, this is clearly a take on ERC20. So let me unwind that a bit. We have an X chain, which is for exchanging assets. We have a P chain, which is like our platform chain. It's for doing administrative type stuff like spinning up subnets and delegating, etc. And then we have the C chain, which is an instance of the EVM. That's our smart contract chain, the C for contract. but we steer people to issuing assets on the exchange. So you can create variable and fixed cap assets, and you can create non-fungible tokens. And then you can do cross-chain swaps. That's built into our platform. So you can issue a Gabriel token on the exchange, and then it's called an ANT, an Avalanche native token, and then you can swap it to the chain. But today, there's not a lot of functionality that you can do yet with the C chain. So the ARC20 API allows us to wrap ANTs, Avalanche native tokens, and give them an ERC20 API. So basically it allows people to issue native assets on the X chain and then interact with them in smart contracts on the C chain. And then they'll ultimately be able to travel across the bridge into other ecosystems, etc. So we have ARC20s, which are coming up. Another very exciting thing we have is freezable assets. So as I mentioned earlier, traditional finance is thousands of trillions of dollars, and we're creating the Internet of Finance. And so we have a full spectrum of functionality which we enable, from permissionless networks like Bitcoin and Ethereum. We have a best-in-class suite of API for creating permissionless networks. But on the other side of the spectrum, we actually enable permissioned and regulatory compliant networks. Because as I mentioned, when you're dealing with traditional finance, a lot of that stuff is not permissionless. And so we need to have APIs which enable to create permissioned and regulatory compliant networks. So we have freezable assets. So you can imagine, for example, an exchange might want to freeze an asset while they're investigating some suspicious activity, or if the secret to an operational key was compromised, may want to freeze an asset, or just legal compliance in any way. So we have freezable assets. Another thing that's exciting is Frosty consensus. So right now we have, there's classical consensus, there's Nakamoto consensus, and Avalanche consensus. And Avalanche consensus, it's very safe, but there are other platforms which do liveness better. So basically, liveness is ensuring that if I issue a transaction, that the transaction will ultimately be accepted by the network. And safety says that if a node accepts one transaction, another node will not accept a transaction which doesn't agree with the first one. So if this node accepts transaction A and this node accepts a transaction B, and somehow B spins A or something, that will never be successful. So there's safety and liveness, and you can trade off on them. Frosty consensus allows us to boost liveness without sacrificing any safety. So that's something Kevin, our COO, and Stephen, one of our head engineers, has been working on. And so those are things that are coming up specifically on our Apricot hard fork. Some other things which I just think are very exciting are prediction markets. So recently, Prosper launched on Avalanche, and they just put out their stats last night, and they've done, I think, $1 million or so in the very first week. So very exciting. Prediction markets, being able to basically tap into the wisdom of the crowd and put some type of number on the outcome of some future event. Very, very exciting. And then another thing are DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations. So, I really do believe that. So let me unwind this. So Peter Diamandis, the guy who created the X Prize and one of the co-founders of the Singularity University, says that within the next 10 years, we will experience more technological innovation than we have in the previous 100 years, right? And Ray Kurzweil, the guy who is the Singularity guy, he says that we'll experience 20,000 years worth of paradigm shifts in this century if you consider 1900 to 2000 to be the pace of change. We'll experience 20,000 years worth of paradigm shifts. So in other words, there are just radical innovations happening all around us, and they feed in and amplify each other. And so I think that distributed autonomous organizations are going to be a big deal, because I believe very much in the Internet of Things, and I believe very much in AI. So I believe whether it's strong AI or not, eventually there are going to be agents which act independent of humans, and they enter into agreements with each other, smart contracts, and they ultimately settle independent of humans on the blockchain. And so, the convergence of AI and the Internet of Things, I think, really plays well in DAOs. So to me, distributed autonomous organizations are very exciting. And then just Avalanche in general, our architecture of subnets and virtual machines, I think that right now we're seeing an absolute explosion of stuff happening on Avalanche, and this is just on our primary subnet. When we have different subnets, we're going to have tens of thousands of these public and private networks, and they're all going to emerge into this global marketplace, which we call the Internet of Finance. Amazing.
So there's a lot coming down the pipe. 2021 is going to be exciting. Probably one of the nice things about the lockdown is everyone's just been heads down shipping. So now we have a lot to catch up on once the conference seasons are back on. Okay, so we're almost coming up towards the time. Any final closing thoughts? Anything that you'd love to see? So we have a hackathon, Covalent and Avalanche hackathon going on, the 1 million wallets hackathon. Any closing thoughts, any words of inspiration, anything that you personally would love to see built in the hackathon?
Sure. So yeah, I think that the opportunity for us to grow our community is, I think it lies out there. So I think one of the things we can do is we can on-ramp developers and users and designers and engineers. It's not just engineers, there's also designers. We need everybody. We need everybody to make this successful. I can get them from other ecosystems. So right now, even though you and I live and breathe this every day and it's kind of encapsulating our entire life, crypto is still relatively small. In the big picture of things, it hasn't impacted everybody's life like it will. And so I think, there is the potential to go to other ecosystems and bring their designers to us, to go to other ecosystems and bring their entrepreneurs and their investors and their engineers to the blockchain industry. Instead of us all bickering over the small amount of talent which we have available to us, let's go reach out to the outside world. And so, we have a lot of wealth in the blockchain ecosystem. What we lack is just manpower. So what I really hope to see is I just hope to see our communities grow. And then also, I would like to see, I think that the blockchain space can be very confrontational. And so it can be challenging for newcomers to enter the ecosystem because the barrier to entry is very high, and sometimes they can be made to feel stupid or something like that. So I would like just the blockchain ecosystem in general to be more accepting and to come to the understanding that if this is going to be as successful as we all want it to be, and it is as successful as we want it to be, this is a worldwide technology. So we are the early internet pioneers of the early 70s, and soon this is going to touch everybody in the world. And so we're going to have to accept that that's our mom and our pop. That's people we don't like. That's people using tools we don't use. So ultimately, I think I would like to see the blockchain ecosystem just to be more accepting to newcomers. But yeah, I think the big thing I would just end on is that there is a ton of amazing people who are not part of the blockchain industry. There's engineers and designers, etc., and we need to do everything we can to on-ramp them into our ecosystems.
Yeah, no, 100% on point. So we actually have a ambassador program that we're calling the Alchemist program. Nice. And it's a growth and leadership program. So we're looking to recruit, I think our benchmark is 2,000 people by end of June or end of July. So end of the summer or midsummer. And so the idea here is that we have different tasks for them, but we also have tutorial sessions on teaching them how to use Tableau, how to use Excel, how to crunch numbers. So actually today there was a Pangolin research report or a set of charts that was put, and that was built by someone from our community using this API and the data that Avalanche provides. So by enabling these guys, I have this grander vision that I think the pendulum has swung far too much into these for-profit corporations, and we've outsourced basic data analysis to the media and the press and the politicians, and nobody really knows what's going on. Everything from the COVID numbers to politics, like everything is you rely on an outside source. And this is akin to 100 years ago where you had a mechanic to crank up your car to run it. And now you can start the car from your smartphone, right? Everything has to be self-serve. So by teaching the next generation of thousands of people how to crunch and understand the data and come up with their own narratives is a very powerful movement you can see in society. So part of this Alchemist program is to do that. And so an example, a proof point there is just the charts that came out this morning. It was by one of our alchemists, and she's done a fab job. So Leilani, kudos to you. I don't know if you're on the call, but she's built this beautiful, I think it's like a bubble chart on the top assets that are being shipped on Pangolin. That's like a very insightful, and she was able to do that by herself, which is amazing. Now, if you can scale that level of capability and skill to thousands of people, That I think that alone is a very powerful thing to have in this. And you don't have to know. It's just like you're like a web developer. You don't have to know blockchains. You don't need to know consensus. You don't need to know like how to run a node. It's just everything should just be interoperable with existing systems, right? So yeah, pretty cool to see this roll out. Okay, Gabriel. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was I held on to every single word. I think I'm gonna go promote this video with my team because everyone needs to watch this to see. It's not like the day-to-day tasks might be a grind, but there is a higher order objective that we're all working towards. And it's important, every once in a while to touch base with that so that you can recharge your batteries. Yeah. Okay, Gabriel, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed this conversation. Take care.
All right. Thank you so much. Cheers.